The dense forest stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast sea of towering trees whose branches intertwined like fingers locked in a quiet, eternal embrace. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the light filtered through the canopy above seemed to slow, casting long, muted shadows over the underbrush. It was a world of silence, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the far-off call of a bird. Yet despite the stillness, Marcus felt every inch of tension in the air, a weight pressing down on him. His heart hammered in his chest, each beat a loud drum in his ears. His hands, slick with sweat, trembled as he tightened his grip on the rope in his gloved hands. The bear, huge, powerful, its dark eyes locked on him, lay just beyond the trees, trapped in a snare that had caught its leg. Blood stained the earth beneath it, and its breathing was labored, shallow. Every exhale was a soft growl that vibrated through the ground, a reminder that he was not in control here. Fear twisted in Marcus's gut. His body screamed at him to run, to turn back, but his feet were rooted in place. He couldn't leave. He had to help. The bear had been caught in a trap, and though Marcus knew it was risky, he couldn't abandon the creature. He had seen too many animals suffer this way in these woods. He couldn't let another one die like this, not when there was something he could do. His throat tightened as he slowly moved forward, each step deliberate, careful. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of the moment. The bear's eyes flickered with confusion and fear, watching him warily, every muscle tense and ready to lash out at the slightest provocation. The growl it emitted sent a cold shiver through Marcus's spine. Every instinct told him to retreat, but Marcus swallowed his fear, choosing instead to speak softly, as if his voice could somehow soothe the beast. "Easy, easy now," he whispered, his own voice barely audible in the vastness of the forest. His breath caught in his throat as he kneeled beside the bear, feeling the intense pressure of its gaze. The creature's body was trembling, either from pain or the raw panic of being trapped. But despite its fear, it didn't lash out. It didn't strike. Marcus's heart pounded louder, and with shaking hands he reached for the bolt cutters from his pack. His fingers brushed against the cold metal, but it felt foreign in his hands. He had done this before, rescued animals from snares and traps, but never one as large, as wild, as dangerous as this. The stakes felt higher. This was no mere deer or rabbit. This was a predator, a force of nature. The bear growled again, its breath rattling in its chest. For a moment Marcus froze, every muscle in his body tensed. He wanted to retreat, wanted to flee, but he couldn't. He was too close now. He had made the decision to help. With a deep breath, he positioned the cutters over the snare. His hands were slick with sweat, his palms cold against the warm metal. The moment felt suspended in time, every second stretching like an eternity. As he squeezed the cutters, he felt the resistance of the steel, and for a moment it seemed like the snare would never break. His stomach churned with fear, his heart racing as he imagined the bear suddenly turning on him. But then, with a sharp snap, the snare broke free, falling away and hitting the ground with a dull thud. Marcus exhaled in relief, but it was short-lived. The bear immediately shifted, struggling to stand, its huge form rocking as it tried to free itself from the trap's painful grip. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded in his chest, every muscle tight with fear. This was it. The bear would surely attack. It had been hurt, it was scared, and he had just freed it. But then, nothing. The bear paused. It stood there, breathing heavily, its eyes locked on Marcus. There was a strange hesitation in the air, as if both man and beast were caught in a standoff. The seconds ticked by, each one dragging on longer than the last. The bear's massive chest rose and fell with each breath, but it didn't attack. It didn't charge. It just watched him, its wild, piercing gaze softening just the slightest bit. Marcus's pulse raced, but something inside him softened. The fear that had been squeezing his chest slowly began to loosen. The bear was still a threat, still unpredictable, but it was no longer acting out of pure aggression. The tension in Marcus's shoulders eased just a little. His breathing steadied, and he found himself inching closer, the calm in his body growing despite the danger. And then, in the most unexpected turn of all, the bear did something that took Marcus's breath away. Rather than charging or lashing out, the bear slowly lowered its massive head, bringing it closer to Marcus. Its sharp, wet nose sniffed the air in front of him, cautious but curious. And then, in a gesture Marcus couldn't fully comprehend, the bear nudged his hand with its snout, gently, almost tenderly. Marcus froze, his heart skipping a beat. He had expected a violent reaction, a fight for survival. But this was not what he had imagined. His hand instinctively hovered above the bear's rough fur. The warmth of its body seeped through his gloves. The sharpness of the animal's form was replaced with something strange, a tenderness, a connection that was impossible to explain. His throat tightened. He could feel the bear's powerful muscles shifting beneath its fur, but there was no aggression in its touch, no sign of hostility. It was as if the creature, in that moment of vulnerability, was showing him something beyond fear. Slowly, Marcus lowered his hand, resting it gently on the bear's thick fur. The contact sent a shock of warmth through his fingertips, and he couldn't help but feel something deeper in his chest, something he couldn't name. The bear's breath, heavy and slow, seemed to sync with his own. The world around them felt smaller, as if all that existed in that moment was the two of them, standing in the heart of the forest, a wild, powerful creature, and a man who had simply tried to help. For a long, silent moment, neither moved. The bear's eyes were wide, almost confused, but there was a strange softness there, a hint of trust, or at least an understanding. Marcus didn't know what had just happened, what kind of connection they had shared, but the air between them had changed. Then, just as quietly as it had appeared, the bear lifted its head and took a few slow steps back. It didn't run, didn't dart away in fear. It merely stepped back, as if acknowledging the moment they had shared. And then, with one last glance, it turned and disappeared into the forest, its massive form blending into the shadows. Marcus stood still for what felt like an eternity, his mind racing. His hands still tingled from where the bear had nudged him, as if the creature had left behind some trace of itself in the touch. He couldn't shake the feeling, the overwhelming sensation that something profound had just occurred. The bear, once a creature of fear and danger, had shown him something raw and beautiful, something that defied everything Marcus had thought he knew about wild animals. He had expected an attack, a fight, a desperate struggle, but instead the bear had left him with a question, a mystery. Why hadn't it attacked? Why had it trusted him, even for just that fleeting moment? As Marcus stood in the clearing, the weight of the silence pressing against him, he realized something. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to the wild than he had ever known. And sometimes trust came in the most unexpected forms.